In 1453, a city that had withstood sieges for more than 1,000 years fell in less than 2 months. Its walls had defied Persians, Arabs, and Crusaders, but they could not withstand the will of one determined sultan. By the mid-15th century, Constantinople was no longer the imperial colossus it had once been. The Byzantine Empire had shrunk to a fractured remnant, its authority limited largely to the city itself and a scattering of territories in the Peloponnese. Economically strained, politically isolated, and militarily exhausted, it survived less by strength than by inertia. Yet the city remained symbolically immense. Its walls, especially the Theodosian land walls, represented continuity with Rome. Its churches embodied Orthodox Christianity's spiritual authority. Its position astride the Bosporus controlled the passage between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. To conquer, it was not merely to seize territory. It was to inherit a legacy. Mehmed II understood this with clarity that belied his youth. When he ascended the Ottoman throne for the second time in 1451, he was 19 years old, but he was not inexperienced. He had observed the mechanics of rule, the fragility of succession, and the dangers posed by rivals. He had also studied the history of previous Ottoman attempts on Constantinople, particularly the failed sieges under Bayezid I and Murad II. Those efforts had faltered due to internal instability, external threats, and insufficient logistical preparation. Mehmed would not repeat those mistakes. His first objective was consolidation. The Ottoman state was already a formidable power spanning Anatolia and the Balkans, but its European and Asian territories were divided by the Bosporus. Constantinople sat between them like a wedge. As long as the Byzantine capital remained independent, it offered a potential base for Latin intervention and internal rebellion. Mehmed moved to neutralize this vulnerability by constructing the fortress of Rumeli Hizari on the European side of the strait in 1452. Positioned opposite the earlier Anadolu Hizari, it allowed the Ottomans to control maritime traffic through the Bosporus with lethal efficiency. Venetian and Genoese ships learned quickly that defiance would be punished. The strait became an Ottoman-controlled artery, tightening the noose around the city. Meanwhile, within Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI faced a grim arithmetic. The population had dwindled dramatically since the city's medieval zenith. Estimates suggest that perhaps 50,000 inhabitants remained, with only a fraction available for defense. Appeals to Western Europe produced limited support. A small Genoese contingent under Giovanni Giustiniani arrived, bringing experience and discipline, but broader Latin intervention failed to materialize in meaningful force. Religious tensions between Orthodox and Catholic factions complicated internal unity. A formal union of churches had been proclaimed in an attempt to secure papal backing, yet many Byzantines regarded it with suspicion or outright hostility. The city was spiritually divided even before the cannons fired. Mehmed prepared methodically. He recruited engineers and artisans capable of constructing siege artillery on a scale previously unseen in the region. The Hungarian cannon founder Orban offered his services, and though his exact role has been debated, large bombards were cast capable of hurling massive stone projectiles against the Theodosian walls. These weapons were cumbersome and slow to reload, but their psychological and structural impact was profound. The Ottomans assembled a force that likely exceeded 70,000 men, possibly more, including janissaries, provincial troops, and irregular auxiliaries. A substantial fleet was also prepared to blockade the city by sea. When the siege began in April 1453, it was not a reckless assault, but a calculated campaign. Ottoman artillery focused on specific sections of the land walls, gradually weakening them through sustained bombardment. Repairs were made nightly by the defenders, but the strain accumulated. The walls, though formidable, were designed for an earlier era of warfare. Gunpowder altered the equation. The repeated concussive force of heavy cannon fire eroded masonry that had once been considered nearly invulnerable. Naval dynamics added complexity. The Byzantines and their Genoese allies maintained control of the Golden Horn by means of a massive chain stretched across its entrance. This barrier prevented the Ottoman fleet from entering the sheltered harbor. Mehmed responded with audacity, grounded in logistical preparation. Ottoman forces transported ships overland on greased logs, bypassing the chain and launching them into the Golden Horn behind the defensive line. The maneuver did not immediately decide the siege, but it expanded the pressure perimeter. Constantinople was now encircled on multiple fronts. Psychological warfare accompanied physical assault. Continuous bombardment disrupted sleep and morale. Ottoman forces staged periodic attacks to test defenses, forcing the defenders into constant readiness. Yet Mehmed also demonstrated calculated restraint. He offered terms of surrender that promised relative clemency, aware that prolonged resistance would necessitate harsher measures under prevailing military customs. Constantine XI refused. For him, surrender meant the extinction of imperial sovereignty. For Mehmed, continued resistance justified escalation. As weeks passed, breaches widened. Giustiniani's injury during a critical assault in late May had a cascading effect on morale. Leadership cohesion faltered at a decisive moment. On May 29, 1453, after sustained bombardment and coordinated assaults, Ottoman forces penetrated the weakened sections near the gate of St. Romanus. Fighting was intense and chaotic. Constantine XI was killed during the final defense, though the exact circumstances remain uncertain. By midday, organized resistance had collapsed. The fall of Constantinople was brutal, but not indiscriminate beyond the norms of 15th century siege warfare. There was looting and enslavement in the immediate aftermath, consistent with customary rites of conquest following refusal to surrender. Yet Mehmed moved swiftly to reassert control. He entered the city not as a marauder, but as a ruler claiming a capital. The Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, symbolizing both conquest and continuity. Rather than dismantle the city's administrative structures entirely, he sought to repurpose them. The transformation of Constantinople into an Ottoman stronghold was neither instantaneous nor purely symbolic. It required repopulation, economic revitalization, and administrative integration. Mehmed encouraged Muslims, Christians, and Jews from across his domains to settle in the city. He reinstated the Orthodox Patriarchate under Ottoman oversight, understanding that religious hierarchy could serve imperial stability. Constantinople, soon increasingly referred to as Istanbul in Ottoman usage, became the political and strategic heart of a growing empire. What had once been a defensive bulwark against Islamic expansion now became the launch point for further Ottoman campaigns into the Balkans and beyond. The capture reshaped trade routes, alarmed Western Europe, and marked a decisive shift in the balance of power between Christian and Muslim polities in the Eastern Mediterranean. But for Mehmed II, it was more than a military victory. It was the consolidation of geography, legitimacy, and destiny into a single fortified capital. The morning after the conquest did not bring order. It brought reckoning. Smoke still hung above shattered districts. Churches stood desecrated or emptied. Markets were silent. The great land walls that had once projected imperial permanence were scarred by artillery and breach. Yet within this devastation, Mehmed II did not behave as a transient conqueror. He acted with the deliberate calculation of a man who intended to rule from this city, not merely over it. The immediate challenge was control. Ottoman military custom permitted 3 days of looting after a city taken by storm, particularly one that had refused surrender. This was not an act of wanton cruelty unique to this siege. It was embedded in the conventions of medieval warfare across cultures. Still, Mehmed curtailed uncontrolled violence earlier than some expected. He needed the city intact. He needed its infrastructure. More importantly, he needed its population. Constantinople in 1453 was underpopulated even before the siege. Entire quarters had fallen into neglect during the empire's final century. Agricultural lands outside the walls were poorly cultivated. Economic life had shifted increasingly into the hands of Genoese merchants in Galata across the Golden Horn. If the city were to serve as an imperial capital for the Ottomans, It required repopulation on a scale that would fundamentally alter its demographic character. Mehmed initiated a policy known as surgan, forced and incentivized resettlement. Muslim families from Anatolia and the Balkans were relocated into abandoned houses. Greek Orthodox inhabitants who had fled were encouraged to return under guarantees of protection. Armenian and Jewish communities were invited or compelled to settle, forming distinct quarters that would later shape the city's social geography. This was not indiscriminate migration. It was strategic demographic engineering. The Sultan understood that a capital without artisans, merchants, and administrators was merely a fortified shell. Skilled craftsmen were transported to rebuild workshops. Markets were reactivated. Tax privileges were offered to encourage commercial revival. Within years, Constantinople began to breathe again, not as the last refuge of Byzantium, but as the administrative core of an expanding Ottoman state. Symbolism mattered deeply in this transformation. Mehmed's entry into the Hagia Sophia was a calculated gesture. The conversion of the cathedral into a mosque signaled the definitive end of Byzantine sovereignty, yet the building itself was preserved. Rather than destroy the architectural inheritance of the Roman emperors, Mehmed appropriated it. He styled himself Kaisar-i Rome, Caesar of Rome, asserting succession rather than mere conquest. In his vision, the Ottoman dynasty was not an external replacement, but the new custodian of imperial universality. This claim was not rhetorical excess. It had administrative consequences. Byzantine bureaucratic practices, fiscal systems, and urban governance mechanisms were studied and selectively absorbed. The Ottomans did not replicate Byzantine institutions wholesale, but neither did they discard centuries of administrative knowledge. Continuity and transformation coexisted. Religious policy became another pillar of consolidation. Mehmed re-established the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate under Gennadius Scholarius. This was a strategic decision. By restoring the Patriarchate, the Sultan positioned himself as protector of Orthodox Christians within his domains. The Patriarch became both spiritual leader and intermediary between the state and Orthodox subjects. This arrangement laid foundations for what would later formalize into the millet system, a structure allowing religious communities internal autonomy under Ottoman sovereignty. Such measures were not acts of tolerance in a modern sense. They were instruments of governance. By institutionalizing religious hierarchy, Mehmed reduced the likelihood of insurgency rooted in spiritual grievance. He transformed potential resistance into regulated coexistence. Militarily, Constantinople's strategic value became immediately apparent. The city controlled the Bosporus and commanded access between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. With Rumeli Hisari already operational and the capital firmly in Ottoman hands, the strait ceased to be a contested frontier. It became an internal artery of empire. Grain from the Black Sea regions could now flow securely to sustain the city. Naval deployments could be coordinated from a centralized maritime hub. The Genoese colony of Galata, which had maintained a cautious neutrality during the siege, was allowed to retain limited commercial privileges after submission. Mehmed understood the economic importance of maritime trade networks. Crushing them outright would have damaged revenue. Instead, he subordinated them. Venetian and Genoese merchants continued to operate, but under Ottoman oversight and taxation. The psychological impact of the conquest reverberated far beyond the city. In Western Europe, the fall of Constantinople triggered alarm and calls for crusade. Yet concrete military response remained fragmented. Political rivalries among European powers hindered unified action. Mehmed exploited this disunity. While diplomatic envoys debated, Ottoman forces consolidated. Within the Balkans, the message was unmistakable. The last great bastion of Byzantine resistance had fallen. Vassal states recalibrated their loyalties. Some sought accommodation, others prepared for confrontation, but none could ignore the shift in balance. For Mehmed himself, the conquest validated his authority internally. His earlier reign as a youth had been overshadowed by regents and cautious advisors. Now, He stood as the conqueror of Constantinople, a title that strengthened his position against potential rivals within the Ottoman elite. The Janissaries, whose loyalty was essential, had shared in the victory. Provincial governors recognized the strategic genius of securing the imperial capital. Yet consolidation required vigilance. Anatolian principalities still harbored ambitions of autonomy. In the Balkans, Hungarian power under John Hunyadi posed a significant threat. The capture of Constantinople did not eliminate external enemies. It redefined the arena of conflict. Mehmed's strategy shifted from siege to projection. With his capital secure, he embarked on campaigns aimed at eliminating rival strongholds that could challenge Ottoman dominance. The Despotate of the Morea, remnants of Byzantine authority in the Peloponnese, would soon face pressure. Serbian and Bosnian territories would become theaters of expansion. The city that had once resisted Ottoman encirclement now functioned as the logistical and administrative base from which encirclement expanded outward. Architecturally, Mehmed began reshaping the urban landscape to reflect imperial ambition. Construction of the old palace commenced, establishing a seat of governance within the city. Foundations were laid for what would later become the Topkapi Palace complex. Mosques, markets, and public works projects signaled permanence. These were not improvised measures. They were deliberate statements. The Ottoman state had not merely captured Constantinople. It had claimed its future. In transforming the city into an Ottoman stronghold, Mehmed achieved more than military victory. He neutralized a strategic threat, appropriated imperial legitimacy, engineered demographic stability, and established a capital capable of sustaining long-term expansion. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of Byzantine political independence, but it also marked the beginning of a new imperial phase, one centered not on nomadic frontiers or regional power struggles, but on a fortified metropolis positioned at the crossroads of continents. The conquest had been violent. The consolidation was calculated. And from this recalibrated capital, the Ottoman Empire prepared to redefine the balance of power across southeastern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean. With Constantinople secured, Mehmed II faced a paradox. He had captured the most symbolically charged city in the eastern Mediterranean, yet symbolism alone could not sustain empire. A capital required insulation from encirclement, reliable supply lines, and the elimination of rival claimants to regional influence. The transformation of the city into an Ottoman stronghold would ultimately depend not only on walls and garrisons, but on the systematic neutralization of every political and military pressure point surrounding it. To the north and west, the Kingdom of Hungary remained the most formidable Christian power in the Balkans. John Hunyadi, though aging, had already demonstrated the capacity to challenge Ottoman expansion. The failed Crusade of Varna in 1444 had not erased Hungarian resistance. It had hardened it. Mehmed understood that Constantinople's security required pushing the defensive perimeter outward. The city could not remain a forward frontier exposed to counteroffensive. In 1456, Ottoman forces advanced toward Belgrade, a fortress controlling access to the Hungarian plain. The siege tested Mehmed's evolving military doctrine. Artillery once again played a central role, reflecting lessons learned during the assault on Constantinople. Yet Belgrade did not fall. Hunyadi organized a determined defense, and the Ottomans suffered significant losses. Mehmed himself was reportedly wounded. The failure revealed limits. Conquest of Constantinople had not rendered the Ottoman army invincible. But defeat did not translate into retreat. Instead, Mehmed recalibrated. Rather than committing disproportionate resources to a single northern thrust, he adopted a multi-directional strategy. Serbia was gradually subdued. Bosnia would fall in 1463. Each annexation tightened Ottoman control over the Balkan interior, reducing the capacity of hostile powers to mount coordinated resistance near the imperial capital. Simultaneously, Mehmed turned eastward. Anatolia, though largely under Ottoman authority, contained semi-autonomous Turkoman principalities and the persistent influence of the Karamanids. These rival dynasties posed both ideological and strategic challenges. If Constantinople was to function as an uncontested capital, the hinterland feeding it had to be stable. Campaigns against Karamanid territories reinforced Ottoman dominance in central Anatolia, ensuring that the supply routes linking Asia Minor to the Bosporus remained secure. Naval power became another instrument of consolidation. The fall of Constantinople had elevated the strategic importance of maritime control. Venetian and Genoese enclaves dotted the Aegean and Black Sea coasts. Their fleets could threaten Ottoman communications or support insurrection. Mehmed invested heavily in shipbuilding. The Ottoman navy expanded, transforming from a supporting force into a central component of imperial strategy. The Black Sea in particular became a focus. By the mid-15th century, Genoese colonies such as Kaffa in Crimea operated as commercial hubs largely independent of direct Ottoman supervision. In 1475, Ottoman forces intervened decisively in Crimea, establishing suzerainty over the Crimean Khanate. This move secured northern maritime routes and further insulated Constantinople from external naval pressure. Grain shipments from the steppe regions flowed more reliably toward the capital, reinforcing its economic resilience. Internally, Mehmed refined administrative centralization. The Devshirme system, through which Christian youths were recruited and trained for military or bureaucratic service, expanded in scope. The Janissary Corps grew not merely in size, but in institutional influence. These soldiers were directly loyal to the sultan, detached from provincial aristocracies. Their presence in the capital served as both shield and counterbalance, ensuring that no regional faction could dominate the political center. Fiscal reform accompanied military expansion. Land grants known as timars were redistributed strategically to cavalry officers in exchange for service. This system tied provincial military elites to the central authority while sustaining agricultural productivity. Revenues from newly conquered territories flowed toward Constantinople, financing construction, court expenditures, and further campaigns. The city was no longer an isolated prize. It was the fiscal heart of a machine designed for continuous expansion.
Urban development reinforced imperial identity. Mehmed commissioned the construction of the Fatih Mosque complex, erected on the site of the former Church of the Holy Apostles. This was not an act of random replacement. It symbolized succession. The architectural program included madrasas, hospitals, and markets, embedding religious, educational, and economic life into a cohesive urban framework. Constantinople was being reshaped into an Ottoman Islamic metropolis while retaining multi-confessional character. The psychological dimension of rule remained central. Mehmed cultivated an image of universal sovereignty. He corresponded with Italian humanists, collected manuscripts, and demonstrated interest in classical history. His court reflected a synthesis of Islamic, Turkic, and Byzantine influences. This intellectual posture reinforced his claim to imperial legitimacy beyond purely military conquest. Yet consolidation required vigilance against internal dissent. The Ottoman elite was not monolithic. Powerful viziers and provincial governors possessed ambitions that required careful management. Mehmed occasionally removed or executed high-ranking officials suspected of disloyalty or incompetence. Such measures were not arbitrary cruelty but calculated demonstrations of authority. The capital could not become hostage to factional intrigue. Constantinople's fortifications were repaired and enhanced. Artillery foundries were maintained. Garrison forces remained substantial. The memory of siege lingered, shaping defensive planning. Mehmed did not assume permanence, he engineered it. In the broader Mediterranean, the balance of power continued to shift. Venice, though commercially pragmatic, remained wary. Skirmishes and diplomatic negotiations alternated throughout the 1460s and 1470s. The Ottomans captured key Aegean islands, projecting influence deeper into maritime trade networks. Each acquisition extended the defensive perimeter of the capital outward, transforming potential staging grounds for invasion into Ottoman-controlled nodes. By the late 1470s, Constantinople was no longer a vulnerable frontier city. It had become the operational core of a territorially expansive empire stretching from the Danube to eastern Anatolia, from the Adriatic approaches to the Black Sea. The transformation was structural, not merely symbolic. Military reform, demographic engineering, fiscal integration, naval expansion, and architectural reconfiguration converged to anchor Ottoman authority. Mehmed II did not simply occupy Constantinople. He absorbed it into a system designed for endurance. The city's geography, once a barrier to Ottoman unity, became the hinge of imperial coherence. Its harbors supported fleets. Its markets sustained armies. Its institutions mediated diverse populations. And from its fortified heart, the Ottoman state projected power with increasing confidence across Europe and Asia. By the 1460s, Constantinople was no longer recovering. It was transforming. The scars of 1453 had not disappeared, but they had been absorbed into a new urban logic. Mehmed II understood that a stronghold was not defined solely by battlements and cannons. It required ideological gravity. A capital had to command loyalty not only through force, but through inevitability. The city's reconstruction was therefore political architecture in its purest form. The old palace, constructed soon after the conquest, initially served as the administrative nucleus. Yet Mehmed soon recognized that the symbolic center of power needed to reflect a broader imperial vision. On the promontory overlooking the Bosporus and the Golden Horn, construction began on what would become the Topkapi Palace. Its placement was deliberate. From its courtyards, one could command sight lines over maritime routes that had once carried Byzantine fleets and Genoese merchants. Now they carried Ottoman authority. Topkapi was not modeled on a single architectural tradition. It combined elements of Islamic palace design with spatial concepts inherited indirectly from Byzantine ceremonial culture. The layered courtyards, progressively restricted and hierarchically arranged, reinforced the mystique of the sultan. Access narrowed as one moved inward, culminating in the private chambers and the imperial council hall. Governance became a ritualized performance of controlled proximity. This restructuring of space altered political psychology. Byzantine emperors had ruled from a city encircled by threats, dependent on foreign alliances and maritime trade privileges granted to Italian republics. Mehmed's Constantinople projected self-sufficiency. The court was not a besieged relic but the confident center of expansion. Administrative centralization accelerated. The Imperial Council, or Divan, functioned as a structured advisory body, yet ultimate authority remained firmly with the Sultan. Viziers operated within clearly delineated hierarchies. The Devshirme recruited elite, trained in palace schools, formed a class whose loyalty derived from institutional advancement rather than hereditary entitlement. This reduced the risk of provincial magnates transforming regional influence into autonomous power bases. The city itself became a laboratory of controlled pluralism. Distinct quarters formed around religious and ethnic communities. Greek Orthodox districts clustered near traditional ecclesiastical centers. Armenian and Jewish communities established commercial networks that revitalized trade. Muslim populations expanded steadily, filling administrative and military roles. Mehmed did not attempt cultural homogenization. Instead, he imposed a political framework within which diversity functioned under Ottoman sovereignty. Economic revitalization followed structured incentives. Caravan routes from Anatolia and Persia were directed toward the capital. Maritime tolls through the Bosporus generated revenue streams previously contested by Byzantine authorities and Italian merchants. The Ottoman treasury invested in markets, baths, bridges, and public kitchens. These were not merely civic improvements, they were instruments of legitimacy. A prosperous capital signaled divine favor and administrative competence. Militarily, Constantinople's fortifications were reinforced, but the strategic doctrine had shifted outward. The city was no longer expected to endure isolation. It was the anchor of a network of fortified positions extending deep into the Balkans and across Anatolia. Garrisons stationed in newly conquered territories ensured that potential uprisings would be confronted before they could threaten the imperial center. In 1461, the Empire of Trebizond fell to Ottoman forces. This eliminated the last independent Byzantine successor state along the Black Sea coast. The symbolic resonance was profound. Constantinople was no longer a reclaimed fragment of a fractured Roman world, it was the sole inheritor of that legacy within the region. Competing claims dissolved under military pressure. Further west, the annexation of Bosnia in 1463 and subsequent campaigns consolidated Ottoman presence along the Danube corridor. Each territorial acquisition tightened the strategic buffer protecting the capital. Enemies would now have to penetrate layers of controlled territory before approaching the Bosporus. Yet power projection was not confined to land campaigns. The Ottoman navy expanded significantly during Mehmed's reign. Shipyards in Constantinople and Gallipoli increased production. Maritime operations targeted Aegean islands and Venetian strongholds. Though naval supremacy would fluctuate in subsequent decades, the capital's role as a naval headquarters was firmly established. The Golden Horn, once shielded by a defensive chain against Ottoman ships, now hosted imperial fleets. Psychologically, the transformation of Constantinople into an Ottoman stronghold altered the self-conception of the dynasty. Earlier Ottoman rulers had operated as frontier ghazis, warrior leaders expanding into Byzantine lands from Anatolian bases. Mehmed reoriented that identity. The dynasty was now imperial in scale, seated in a city associated with Roman sovereignty. This redefinition affected court ceremony, titulature, and diplomatic posture. European observers reacted with unease. Papal appeals for crusade persisted, yet practical unity remained elusive. Venetian-Ottoman wars demonstrated the limits of maritime confrontation. Diplomatic treaties alternated with skirmishes, reflecting a grudging acknowledgement of Ottoman permanence. Constantinople's transformation into Istanbul, though the formal adoption of the name would evolve gradually, signified not erasure but layered continuity. Mehmed's later campaigns reflected ambition extending beyond immediate security. His intervention in Otranto in southern Italy in 1480 suggested a willingness to project power directly into the Italian peninsula. Although the occupation was short-lived following his death in 1481, it revealed the strategic confidence born from a secure and fortified capital. Constantinople had shifted from defensive bastion to launch platform. Internally, succession planning remained an undercurrent of tension. Ottoman practice allowed fratricidal struggle to determine leadership among princes. Mehmed's authority suppressed overt conflict during his lifetime, but the structure he built required continued central strength. The capital's stability depended on decisive leadership capable of maintaining administrative cohesion. By the end of his reign, Mehmed II had achieved what earlier sultans had only imagined. Constantinople was no longer a foreign citadel resisting Ottoman encirclement. It was the nerve center of a territorially expansive, bureaucratically organized, and militarily adaptive empire. Its walls still stood, but their meaning had changed. They no longer symbolized endurance against Islam. They symbolized the consolidation of Ottoman sovereignty. The city's harbors moved grain, troops, and ideas. Its mosques and churches functioned under regulated coexistence. Its palace projected calculated magnificence. The transformation was neither instantaneous nor purely architectural. It was systemic. When Mehmed died in 1481, he left behind more than conquered territory. He left an imperial capital whose strategic depth, administrative coherence, and symbolic authority would anchor Ottoman power for centuries. Constantinople had become an Ottoman stronghold not merely because it had been taken, but because it had been absorbed, reorganized, and weaponized as the center of an empire in motion. Mehmed II did not inherit a stable imperial machine. He built one around a captured city and then forced it to endure. When he died in 1481, the Ottoman state was no longer a frontier principality pressing against Byzantine decay. It was an empire anchored in Constantinople, projecting authority across southeastern Europe, Anatolia, and the Black Sea basin. Yet the true measure of whether Constantinople had become a durable stronghold would not be found in Mehmed's lifetime alone. It would be tested in succession, in internal strain, and in the empire's ability to sustain expansion without fragmenting. The immediate crisis following his death exposed both strength and vulnerability. His sons Bayezid and Sem contested the throne. This was not unusual in Ottoman political culture, where succession was not strictly primogeniture but determined through struggle among eligible princes. Civil conflict threatened to destabilize the carefully centralized system Mehmed had constructed. Yet the fact that the struggle centered on control of Constantinople itself demonstrated the city's transformed role. Whoever controlled the capital controlled the empire. Bayezid II ultimately prevailed. Sem sought support abroad, eventually becoming a political instrument in European courts. The episode underscored a critical reality. Constantinople had become the gravitational center of legitimacy. Provincial bases no longer sufficed. Authority radiated outward from the Bosporus. Under Bayezid II, expansion slowed relative to Mehmed's aggressive tempo, but consolidation continued. Administrative institutions rooted in the capital deepened their reach. The Devshirme system matured into a pipeline for bureaucratic and military leadership. The Janissary Corps, headquartered in Constantinople, grew more politically aware. Their loyalty was tied to the Sultan, but their collective identity was now inseparable from the capital's stability. This dual role, guardian and potential pressure force, would shape Ottoman politics for centuries. The city's economy strengthened through trade. After the fall of Granada in 1492, Jewish refugees expelled from Spain found refuge within Ottoman domains, including Constantinople. Their arrival was not incidental. The Ottoman state recognized economic opportunity in welcoming skilled migrants. Commerce, finance, and artisanal production benefited. The capital's demographic complexity increased, reinforcing its cosmopolitan character under structured imperial oversight. Yet strategic challenges persisted. The Safavid rise in eastern Anatolia and Persia at the turn of the 16th century introduced a new ideological and military adversary. Unlike fragmented Balkan states, the Safavids represented a centralized power capable of mobilizing sectarian loyalty. The threat was not directed immediately at Constantinople, but the capital's security depended on stability across Anatolia. A hostile eastern frontier could fracture supply lines and redirect military resources away from Europe. The accession of Selim I in 1512 marked another decisive phase. Selim's campaigns against the Safavids and later the Mamluk Sultanate reoriented the empire southward and eastward. When Ottoman forces defeated the Mamluks in 1517, they absorbed Syria and Egypt. This had profound implications for Constantinople. The city became the capital not only of a Balkan Anatolian empire but of a transcontinental power controlling the eastern Mediterranean southern coastline and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Control of Egypt redirected vast agricultural wealth and trade revenue toward the imperial center. Grain shipments from the Nile supplemented Black Sea supplies, enhancing food security for Constantinople's growing population. The capital's resilience was now supported by multiple economic arteries. Its strategic depth expanded dramatically. Under Suleiman I, later known in European sources as Suleiman the Magnificent, the transformation of Constantinople into an unquestioned imperial stronghold reached architectural and administrative maturity. The construction of the Suleimani mosque complex in the mid-16th century was not merely a religious project. It symbolized imperial confidence at its zenith. Designed by the architect Sinan, the complex integrated worship, education, charity, and urban planning into a single monumental statement overlooking the Golden Horn. By this stage, the city functioned as a coordinated hub of governance. The imperial council met regularly. Legal reforms codified administrative practice. Provincial governors operated within standardized frameworks, reporting to the center. Military campaigns into Hungary, the eastern Mediterranean, and Mesopotamia were supplied and directed from Constantinople's docks and arsenals. The stronghold Mehmed envisioned had become self-sustaining. Its walls were rarely tested directly again, not because potential enemies lacked ambition, but because the empire's defensive perimeter had been pushed outward across multiple fronts. Vienna, Buda, Baghdad, these became the contested edges. Constantinople was no longer a frontline city. Yet internal pressures evolved alongside expansion. The Janissaries, once an instrument of centralized power, began asserting political influence within the capital. Their presence ensured security but also introduced volatility. Economic fluctuations, military setbacks, or succession disputes could trigger unrest concentrated in the very city that symbolized imperial stability. Still, the structural transformation initiated by Mehmed endured. The demographic policies of repopulation had created a city capable of absorbing migration waves. The integration of diverse religious communities under regulated autonomy reduced large-scale sectarian revolt within the capital. Maritime control of the Bosporus ensured strategic oversight of trade between the Black Sea and Mediterranean. European perceptions shifted over time. Constantinople was no longer imagined as a lost Christian bastion awaiting recovery. It was acknowledged, however reluctantly, as the seat of a major imperial power. Diplomatic missions from France, Venice, and the Habsburg realms maintained embassies in the city. Negotiations, treaties, and rivalries unfolded not on the ruins of Byzantium, but in the court of an Ottoman sultan. Mehmed II's conquest had been a violent rupture. His subsequent policies transformed that rupture into permanence. The city's architecture, bureaucracy, economy, and military integration combined to create a capital that did not merely survive conquest, it thrived because of it. Constantinople had once represented the final defense of a declining empire. Under Ottoman rule, it became the strategic heart of a state whose expansion would shape the balance of power across 3 continents for centuries. And the foundations of that transformation lay not only in breached walls, but in calculated reconstruction. By the mid-16th century, Constantinople had ceased to be a contested prize. It had become the unquestioned center of an imperial system whose frontiers stretched from Central Europe to the Arabian Peninsula. Yet strength at the core required constant recalibration. The city's transformation into an Ottoman stronghold did not eliminate vulnerability. It relocated it to new forms, economic strain, institutional inertia, and shifting global trade patterns that slowly began to bypass the eastern Mediterranean. Under Suleiman I, the empire reached its territorial apex. Campaigns into Hungary culminated in the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, reshaping Central European politics. Baghdad was incorporated in 1534, reinforcing Ottoman dominance in Mesopotamia. Naval confrontations in the Mediterranean, particularly against Habsburg and Venetian forces, underscored Constantinople's role as maritime headquarters. The imperial dockyards along the Golden Horn expanded. Fleet construction became a sustained enterprise rather than a temporary mobilization. Yet even during this zenith, structural pressures emerged. The influx of silver from the New World into European markets altered price systems across the Mediterranean. Inflation affected wages and provisioning costs within Constantinople. The capital's population, now well above its mid-15th century levels, depended on stable grain shipments from Egypt and the Black Sea. Any disruption in these arteries could produce unrest. Administrative responses reflected the city's institutional maturity. Tax farming expanded as a fiscal mechanism, allowing the state to secure revenue in advance. While efficient in the short term, it gradually shifted economic leverage toward provincial elites who could afford such contracts. Constantinople remained the supervisory center, but the balance between central authority and local power required careful management. The Janissary Corps also evolved. Originally conceived as an elite infantry loyal exclusively to the Sultan, the corps grew in size and political consciousness. Stationed largely in the capital, Janissaries developed economic interests within the city, engaging in trade, forming guild affiliations and establishing familial ties. Their identity blurred from purely military institution to socio-political constituency. This transformation did not immediately undermine Constantinople's strength, but it introduced a variable that Mehmed's earlier system had sought to contain. Externally, the Ottoman-Habsburg rivalry defined much of the strategic landscape. Vienna became a focal point in 1529 and again later in the 17th century. Yet even during these confrontations, Constantinople itself remained insulated. The empire's forward defensive posture absorbed conflict. The capital's function was coordination, supply, and decision-making, not immediate survival. Architecturally, the city continued to assert imperial confidence. Sinan's projects reshaped the skyline. Aqueducts, bridges, and caravanserais reinforced infrastructural capacity. The Suleimani complex did not stand alone. It became part of a broader urban network linking religious authority with social welfare. Hospitals, schools, and kitchens institutionalized public support systems that enhanced the capital's legitimacy among its inhabitants. Diplomatically, Constantinople operated as a hub of international negotiation. Ambassadors from France secured capitulations granting commercial privileges, a calculated Ottoman strategy to counterbalance Habsburg power. Venetian envoys navigated shifting alliances. The court became a theater of calculated engagement with Europe, rather than a barricaded stronghold anticipating siege. Yet the 17th century would test the resilience of Mehmed's transformation. Military setbacks such as the protracted war in Crete against Venice and later defeats against Habsburg coalitions strained resources. The failed Second Siege of Vienna in 1683 marked a turning point in territorial expansion. The empire shifted from steady growth to negotiated contraction. Still, Constantinople did not revert to vulnerability. Even as peripheral territories changed hands, the capital remained administratively intact. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 signaled loss of significant European lands, yet the city itself was secure. Its strength lay not only in territory but in entrenched institutions. Economic adaptation became necessary as Atlantic trade routes increasingly dominated global commerce. The Eastern Mediterranean no longer monopolized spice and silk routes. Constantinople's commercial elite adjusted by integrating into new trading networks, though revenue patterns shifted. The city's cosmopolitan character persisted, but competition intensified. Internal reform movements emerged intermittently. Attempts to modernize military organization and fiscal structures often encountered resistance, particularly from entrenched interests within the Janissary Corps. Episodes of unrest in the capital revealed that the greatest threats to stability were no longer external armies at the gates but internal resistance to change. Yet even these crises demonstrated the enduring centrality of the city. Reformers and traditionalists alike understood that control of Constantinople equaled control of the empire. Political struggles unfolded within palace walls and barracks rather than on distant battlefields. The 18th century brought further recalibration. Diplomatic engagement with European powers deepened. Architectural influences blended Ottoman and European styles. The capital evolved culturally without relinquishing its imperial core. Though territorial losses accumulated gradually, the city remained the axis around which governance revolved. Mehmed II's original objective had been to eliminate a strategic threat and secure a unified imperial center. That objective endured long after his death. Even as global power balances shifted and military technology advanced, Constantinople's position at the Bosporus continued to provide strategic leverage. Control of maritime passage remained economically and militarily valuable. The transformation from Byzantine bastion to Ottoman stronghold proved durable because it was not dependent solely on conquest. It rested on administrative integration, demographic engineering, infrastructural investment, and symbolic appropriation. Those pillars allowed the city to withstand not just siege, but centuries of geopolitical fluctuation. By the dawn of the modern era, Constantinople remained what Mehmed had intended it to be, not a frontier outpost, not a vulnerable relic, but the fortified heart of an empire adapting, sometimes reluctantly, to a changing world. By the 18th century, the nature of power had changed, but Constantinople remained the axis upon which the Ottoman state turned. European armies had modernized. Fiscal military states in Vienna, St. Petersburg, and Paris refined bureaucratic efficiency and standardized drill. Naval warfare expanded into global theaters. The Ottoman Empire could no longer rely solely on the momentum built during the Age of Conquest. Yet the capital, secured by geography and centuries of institutional layering, continued to function as the decisive center of authority. The city's strategic value had always rested on control of the Bosporus. That remained unchanged. Russian expansion toward the Black Sea introduced a new and persistent challenge. When the Treaty of Kukuk-Kaynarka was signed in 1774 after a devastating war with Russia, it granted Moscow limited rights to protect Orthodox Christians within Ottoman territories and access to Black Sea navigation. Though the treaty did not compromise Constantinople directly, it altered the diplomatic environment surrounding it. The capital was no longer insulated from great power rivalry, it became a focal point of it. Internally, reform efforts intensified. Sultan Selim III, ascending the throne in 1789, recognized the military imbalance between Ottoman and European forces. His Nizam-i Seded, or New Order, aimed to create a modernized army trained along European lines, financed by new taxation structures. Crucially, these reforms were conceptualized and directed from Constantinople. The capital was both the laboratory and the battleground of institutional transformation. Resistance emerged swiftly. The Janissary Corps, whose privileges had grown entrenched over centuries, viewed reform as existential threat. Their opposition was not merely conservative instinct, it was structural defense of status. The capital's barracks and marketplaces became sites of political agitation. In 1807, rebellion led to Selim III's deposition. Reform, attempted from within the stronghold Mehmed had built, encountered the weight of its own institutional history. Yet the attempt itself revealed continuity. The city remained the nerve center of reformist ambition. When Mehmed II ascended the throne in 1808, he understood that partial measures would fail. The Janissary question had to be resolved decisively. In 1826, in what later became known as the Auspicious Incident, Mehmed II ordered the suppression and dissolution of the Janissary Corps after they revolted against new military regulations. Artillery bombarded their barracks in Constantinople. Thousands were killed or executed. The event was violent, but it marked a structural reset. An institution that had once guarded the capital and enforced centralization under Mehmed II was dismantled to preserve the capital's future viability. The Ottoman stronghold was proving capable of internal self-correction, albeit through force. Simultaneously, nationalist movements within the Balkans introduced new pressures. The Greek War of Independence beginning in 1821 represented not merely provincial unrest but a broader ideological challenge influenced by European revolutionary currents. Constantinople, as imperial center, coordinated military responses and diplomatic negotiations. The eventual recognition of Greek independence in 1830 signaled contraction of territorial control, yet the capital remained administratively intact. The Tanzimat reforms beginning in 1839 further restructured governance. Decrees issued from Constantinople promised legal equality among subjects, administrative reorganization, and modernization of taxation and conscription. These reforms sought to stabilize a multi-ethnic empire under increasing European scrutiny. Embassies in the capital multiplied. European advisors operated within ministries. The city became an arena of accelerated political adaptation. Urban transformation accompanied bureaucratic change. New ministries were housed in purpose-built structures. Western-style educational institutions emerged. The skyline shifted subtly as Baroque and neoclassical influences blended with traditional Ottoman forms. Yet the Bosporus still defined the city's strategic core. Naval installations were modernized. Coastal fortifications adapted to advances in artillery. The Crimean War of 1853 to 1856 demonstrated Constantinople's continued centrality. Allied British and French forces operated in defense of Ottoman territorial integrity against Russian expansion. Diplomatic negotiations unfolded in the capital. Though reliant on European military support, the Ottoman state retained sovereignty over its seat of power. Constantinople did not fall into foreign hands. It remained the diplomatic and administrative pivot. Economic integration into global markets accelerated during the 19th century. Railways linked hinterlands more directly to the capital. Telegraph lines improved communication. Yet financial dependency increased as well. European loans financed infrastructure but deepened debt obligations. Constantinople housed the bureaucracies managing both reform and insolvency. Despite territorial losses in the Balkans during the late 19th century, including Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria gaining autonomy or independence, the capital's function persisted. Sultan Abdulhamid II centralized authority aggressively after 1876, suspending the constitution and ruling with surveillance networks headquartered in the city. Once again, the stronghold adapted through consolidation of control. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 briefly revived constitutional governance. Political clubs, newspapers, and reformist officers operated openly in Constantinople. The city became a crucible of ideological debate: Ottomanism, Islamism, Turkism, competing visions for imperial survival. Yet even as territory contracted, no rival center emerged capable of displacing the capital's authority. By the eve of the First World War, Constantinople had endured nearly 5 centuries as the Ottoman heart. It had weathered internal rebellion, nationalist fragmentation, economic dependency, and great power rivalry. Its survival was not accidental. The transformation initiated in 1453 had embedded resilience into its political and geographic structure. When global war erupted in 1914, the empire entered conflict alongside the Central Powers. Allied forces would attempt to force the Dardanelles in 1915 during the Gallipoli campaign, aiming ultimately at Constantinople. The campaign failed. Once again, the city remained beyond enemy occupation during the height of war. Only after the Ottoman defeat in 1918 did Allied forces occupy Constantinople temporarily. Yet even this occupation underscored the city's centrality. It was the symbolic prize sought to dictate imperial dismemberment. The subsequent Turkish War of Independence shifted the national movement's center to Ankara, but Constantinople's centuries-long role as imperial stronghold had already shaped the political geography of the region irreversibly. From Mehmed II's calculated conquest to the modern era's upheavals, the city endured as the fortified nerve center of state power. Its walls, institutions, and waterways had transformed it from besieged relic into the pivot of an empire navigating the pressures of an evolving world. When Allied troops entered Constantinople in November 1918, it was the first time since 1453 that foreign Christian armies occupied the city. The symbolism was unmistakable. Warships anchored in the Bosporus. Allied flags rose along the waterfront. For a brief moment, it appeared that the stronghold forged by Mehmed II had finally fractured under modern pressure. Yet even in occupation, the deeper architecture of power remained contested rather than erased. The Ottoman Empire had emerged from the First World War militarily defeated and territorially dismantled. The Armistice of Mudros permitted Allied control over strategic points, including the Straits. Constantinople became a city under supervision, its ministries monitored, its arsenals inspected, its political life constrained. The Sultanate persisted formally, but sovereignty had narrowed dramatically. The Allied presence, however, did not translate into uncontested authority. Nationalist resistance coalesced in Anatolia under Mustafa Kemal. Crucially, this movement did not attempt to defend Constantinople directly in military terms. Instead, it redefined the locus of political legitimacy. While the capital remained under occupation, Ankara emerged as the operational center of the independence struggle. This shift marked a profound transformation. For nearly 5 centuries, control of Constantinople had equated to control of the state. Now, a rival center claimed sovereignty independent of the city. The psychological dominance established in 1453 was being reconfigured by 20th-century nationalism. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 proposed severe territorial reductions and internationalization of the Straits. Had it been fully implemented, Constantinople's strategic autonomy would have dissolved. Yet the nationalist movement rejected the treaty, and military campaigns in Anatolia reversed many of its provisions. The eventual Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 recognized the sovereignty of the new Republic of Turkey. With the abolition of the Sultanate in 1922 and the proclamation of the Republic in 1923, Constantinople, now officially Istanbul, lost its status as capital. Ankara became the political center. This decision was not accidental. It symbolized a break from imperial legacy and an orientation toward Anatolian heartlands rather than Mediterranean imperial projection. Yet the city did not lose strategic relevance. Control of the Bosporus and Dardanelles remained central to regional geopolitics. The Montreux Convention of 1936 restored Turkish control over the Straits, reaffirming their military significance. Istanbul, though no longer administrative capital, retained its economic and maritime centrality. The transformation initiated by Mehmed II had created more than an imperial seat. It had established a durable urban core whose geography continued to influence power calculations. The city's harbors, shipyards, and trade networks remained vital. Its demographic complexity persisted, though the population exchange between Greece and Turkey in the 1920s altered its communal composition significantly. Greek Orthodox communities that had survived centuries under Ottoman administration diminished sharply. 20th-century modernization reshaped the skyline. Secular reforms altered religious institutions. Hagia Sophia, converted into a museum in 1935, embodied the layered history of conquest and reinterpretation. The Ottoman palace complex became a museum as well, preserving artifacts of imperial governance. The stronghold had become a historical monument, yet its strategic value endured beneath symbolism. During the Second World War, Turkey maintained neutrality for most of the conflict. Istanbul, positioned between Axis and Allied spheres, functioned as a center of diplomatic maneuvering and intelligence activity. Once again, its geography placed it at the crossroads of great power rivalry. In the Cold War era, Turkey's alignment with NATO in 1952 embedded the Bosporus within a new strategic framework. Soviet naval access to the Mediterranean remained constrained by the Straits regime. Istanbul's control became integral to alliance calculations. Though no longer capital, the city stood at the intersection of military doctrine and geopolitical containment. Urban expansion accelerated dramatically in the latter half of the 20th century. Industrialization and rural migration transformed Istanbul into a megacity. Informal housing spread across hillsides once sparsely populated. Economic vitality intensified, making the city Turkey's financial center. While Ankara administered policy, Istanbul generated capital. The late 20th and early 21st centuries reintroduced debates about identity and legacy. Restoration projects emphasized Ottoman heritage. Public discourse revisited the memory of 1453 not as distant medieval episode, but as foundational narrative of national continuity. The reconversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque in 2020 reflected these currents, demonstrating how symbols forged in Mehmed's era continued to shape contemporary politics. Yet beneath shifting ideological interpretations, the structural fact remained constant. The city's control over maritime passage between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean endowed it with enduring strategic weight. Energy routes, grain exports, and naval movements still converged at the Bosporus. The same strait Mehmed fortified with Rumeli Hizari continued to dictate regional calculations. The occupation of 1918 had seemed to challenge the permanence of the Ottoman stronghold. But in a broader arc, it marked transition rather than erasure. The imperial framework dissolved, yet the geographic and infrastructural foundations laid after 1453 persisted. Istanbul adapted from imperial capital to national metropolis without relinquishing its centrality in regional geopolitics. Mehmed II had sought to eliminate a threat and secure a permanent center of power. Across centuries of reform, contraction, occupation, and republic, the city he captured remained pivotal. Its function evolved, its rulers changed, its institutions were rewritten, but its strategic gravity endured. The stronghold had outlived the empire that built it. The durability of Constantinople as an Ottoman stronghold cannot be measured only by centuries of survival. It must be measured by the scale of transformation it imposed on the balance of power after 1453. Before Mehmed II breached the Theodosian walls, the eastern Mediterranean operated within a fragmented equilibrium. Byzantium, though weakened, still represented a symbolic Christian bulwark between Europe and Anatolia. Italian maritime republics leveraged its vulnerability for commercial dominance. Balkan principalities navigated between Hungarian and Ottoman pressure. The region was unstable but multipolar. The fall of Constantinople ended that ambiguity. With the city secured, the Ottoman Empire gained not merely territory but a permanent strategic fulcrum. Control of the Bosporus allowed the state to regulate movement between the Black Sea and Mediterranean with unprecedented authority. Genoese colonies that had once functioned semi-independently were gradually subordinated. Venetian fleets, though powerful, could no longer dictate terms unilaterally in eastern waters. Trade recalibrated around Ottoman supervision. This consolidation reshaped European strategic planning. The Habsburg dynasty, rising to prominence in Central Europe, now confronted an empire anchored in a fortified metropolis commanding southeastern approaches. Hungary transformed from buffer state into contested frontier. The Ottoman capture of Buda in 1541 completed the encirclement that had begun with Constantinople's fall. Psychologically, the event resonated across Christendom. Papal calls for crusade intensified in the immediate aftermath of 1453, yet sustained coalition warfare proved elusive. Political fragmentation within Europe undermined coordinated response. The Ottoman stronghold in Constantinople became normalized not because it was accepted ideologically, but because it could not be reversed militarily. Meanwhile, the Islamic world interpreted the conquest through different lenses. For many, it fulfilled long-circulating prophecies regarding the capture of the city. For Mehmed himself, the victory reinforced claims to universal sovereignty. The Ottoman Sultanate absorbed not only the physical city but the imperial aura attached to it. Diplomatic correspondence began to reflect this recalibrated self-image. Titles emphasized guardianship over lands once ruled by Rome. This symbolic appropriation influenced governance beyond the capital. Provincial elites understood that loyalty was owed to a ruler who now presided from a city of global historical significance. The transformation elevated the Ottoman court above regional rivalries. It created hierarchy where fragmentation had existed. Economically, the integration of Constantinople into Ottoman systems redirected revenue flows. Customs duties on maritime traffic strengthened central finances. Agricultural hinterlands in Thrace and Anatolia were organized to provision the capital consistently. By securing Crimea and Egyptian grain routes, the empire ensured that the city would not face the demographic collapse that had marked late Byzantine decline. Militarily, the capital's position reduced strategic vulnerability. Unlike inland capitals susceptible to rapid overland assault, Constantinople's peninsular geography, fortified by walls and water, provided layered defense. Any invading force would have to traverse extended supply lines before confronting its fortifications. After 1453, no external army would seriously threaten the city for centuries. Even during moments of imperial contraction, the stronghold functioned as stabilizing anchor. When territories in the Balkans achieved independence in the 19th century, they did not possess the capacity to challenge Istanbul directly. The empire's geopolitical shrinkage occurred at the periphery, not at its core. The broader Mediterranean balance shifted as well. Spanish expansion following the Reconquista redirected European focus toward the Atlantic. Portugal sought sea routes to India, partially motivated by desire to bypass Ottoman-controlled trade corridors. While these explorations were driven by multiple factors, the consolidation of eastern routes under Ottoman authority accelerated European maritime experimentation. In this indirect sense, Constantinople's fall influenced the age of oceanic expansion. Within the empire, the capital fostered intellectual and artistic synthesis.
Scholars, architects, and administrators drawn from diverse backgrounds converged in the city. Legal codification under Suleiman institutionalized governance across vast territories. Such systemic coherence would have been impossible without a stable administrative nucleus. Yet the transformation was not static triumph. It imposed continuous obligation. To hold Constantinople was to invite scrutiny, rivalry, and expectation. The city became both asset and responsibility. Any sign of weakness at the center risked magnification across the empire. The Allied occupation in 1918 briefly suggested that the stronghold's long arc had ended. But the subsequent national resistance and renegotiation of sovereignty demonstrated that control of the city still carried decisive weight. Even when Ankara replaced it as political capital, Istanbul remained the symbolic and economic heart of the Republic. In retrospect, Mehmed II's conquest did not simply close a medieval chapter. It reorganized the geopolitical architecture of southeastern Europe and the Near East. The Ottoman Empire's ability to endure for nearly 5 centuries after 1453 cannot be separated from the stability provided by its capital. Constantinople had once stood as the final remnant of a shrinking empire. After 1453, it became the command center of expansion, reform, crisis management, and adaptation. Its fortifications deterred siege. Its waterways regulated trade. Its institutions coordinated governance across continents. The stronghold was not indestructible. Empires rise and fall. But the strategic logic that guided Mehmed II, secure the hinge of continents, absorb its legacy, fortify its geography, and build institutions around it, proved enduring beyond his lifetime. And through centuries of war, diplomacy, reform, and reinvention, the city he sees continued to shape the destiny of those who ruled from its shores. In 1453, Mehmed II did not merely conquer a city. He redefined the architecture of power in a region that had been contested for over a millennium. Constantinople had been a prize, a symbol, a target of ambition for successive empires. Yet until Mehmed, it had remained an obstacle. Fortified, resilient, and politically isolated but strategically decisive. Its fall did not simply remove a rival. It eliminated the last territorial wedge dividing Ottoman domains and replaced it with a capital engineered for endurance. The transformation that followed was deliberate. Mehmed understood that conquest without consolidation would dissolve into instability. He therefore imposed demographic restructuring, administrative absorption, and architectural reinvention upon a city whose identity had been shaped by Rome and Byzantium. Rather than erase that identity, he appropriated it. By adopting imperial titulature and preserving core institutional frameworks, he converted legacy into legitimacy. The result was not a temporary occupation, but systemic integration. Geographically, Constantinople provided what earlier Ottoman centers could not: maritime command, defensible terrain, and direct access between continents. The Bosporus became internal corridor rather than contested boundary. Naval capacity expanded from its harbors. Trade revenue stabilized from regulated passage. The city's peninsular form, protected by water on 3 sides and reinforced land walls, ensured that any adversary would confront logistical difficulty long before reaching its gates. Administratively, the capital centralized authority in ways that reshaped Ottoman governance. The Devshirme system supplied bureaucrats and soldiers whose allegiance flowed upward to the sultan rather than outward to provincial clans. The imperial council institutionalized deliberation while preserving ultimate sovereignty. Religious communities were structured into recognized hierarchies, reducing centrifugal sectarian tension. Economically, Constantinople became gravitational center. Grain from Crimea and Egypt fed its markets. Caravans from Anatolia and Persia converged at its bazaars. European merchants negotiated from its docks under capitulatory arrangements designed to serve Ottoman interests. Revenue streams that once bypassed or undermined Byzantine authority were redirected into imperial coffers. Psychologically, the conquest shifted perception across continents. For Europe, it marked a strategic recalibration and accelerated maritime exploration. For the Islamic world, it signaled ascendancy of a dynasty capable of claiming universal sovereignty. For For the Ottoman elite, it redefined ambition. The empire was no longer frontier state expanding against a decaying neighbor. It was a centralized power radiating from a fortified metropolis. The endurance of this transformation is evident in what followed. Territorial expansion under Mehmed's successors relied upon the capital's logistical coordination. Reform movements centuries later operated within institutions anchored in the city. Even periods of contraction did not threaten its structural dominance. When foreign occupation came in the 20th century, it was temporary. The city's strategic weight remained too significant to dissolve. Ultimately, Constantinople, renamed and recontextualized over time, outlived the empire that reshaped it. Its walls became monuments rather than active defenses, yet their symbolism endured. The palaces evolved into museums, yet they continued to narrate imperial authority. The straits it commands remained central to global trade and military calculation. Mehmed II's achievement was therefore not solely military. It was architectural in the broadest sense. He redesigned the political geography of his realm. By securing the hinge between Europe and Asia, absorbing imperial legacy, and constructing administrative permanence, he ensured that the city would function as more than a conquered capital. It would operate as a stabilizing axis for centuries. Strongholds are often imagined as static fortresses resisting assault. Constantinople under Ottoman rule became something more complex. It was a dynamic center, capable of projecting force outward, absorbing cultural currents inward, and adapting to shifting global structures without surrendering its core strategic advantage. The empire that governed from its shores would eventually fragment under modern pressures of nationalism, industrial warfare, and economic transformation. Yet the logic established in 1453 persisted. Control the straits, command the crossroads, centralize authority, and anchor legitimacy in a city whose geography amplifies power. From breached walls to imperial capital, from medieval siege to modern metropolis, the arc that began with Mehmed II reshaped not only a city, but the trajectory of an empire. Constantinople became an Ottoman stronghold because it was conquered with artillery, but it endured because it was reconstructed with vision. And in that reconstruction lay the true conquest